Welcome to the Together for Education in Ames podcast, where we have meaningful conversations on the state of our local school districts. Schools should be a place of hope for children, where they can come and learn without fear of being judged or labeled. We advocate for unity in our student population and excellence in education. I'm Kira Werstein, your host. Hosting with me today is Cedric Aleman and Jennifer Pinto. In today's episode, we as a community and a school district in Ames head into Black History Month, we have high hopes that this initiative this year will land better with students, families, teachers, and the community than it did last year. And we're eager and supportive to celebrate Black heroes, innovators, and achievers. We're hopeful to support racial reconciliation. And in order to do that, the approach that's used with celebrating Black History Month is important. And while it has not been shared with families and the public here at Together for Education in Ames, we do have a number of teachers and staff in the Ames School District that have shared with us the training materials that have been used for teachers for this month from the Equity Department. And sadly, some of these training materials do violate House File 802, a bill that was passed in May. More to come on that in the next few minutes, related to racism and sexism training in schools. And we're going to shed light on that today. So again, my name is Kira Werstein. I'm a college teaching professor and mother of 3 children in the Ames School District.
I'm Cedric Aleman. I'm a Spanish teacher.
And I'm Jen Pinto, and I'm a special ed teacher.
And so today, as we get started, we're going to take a look first at, I mentioned House File 802 bill, and there are 10 concepts that are in this bill that passed in May, and it is on requirements related to racism and sexism trainings in public and post-secondary institutions. And so again, there's a list of 10 concepts that are called specific divisive concepts. There's 2 of them that I'm just going to highlight today that we're going to focus on more specifically. Number 8, which is that this is prohibited. Any individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any form of psychological distress on account of that individual's race or sex. And then number 10, another concept prohibited is that any other form of race or sex scapegoating, any form of race or sex stereotyping, those are prohibited. Now, if you're not familiar with what that looks like specifically in training materials, race or sex scapegoating includes assigning fault, blame, or bias to race or sex to members of race or sex because of their race or sex, or claiming that consciously or unconsciously, by virtue of a person's race or sex, members of any race are inherently racist or are inherently inclined to impress others, or that members of a sex are inherently sexist or inclined to oppress others. So what that would be with specifically is if someone would say or teach or train their staff in such a way where they would say, if you are in this race, you are an oppressor of other races. Okay, so that'd be a specific example there. Now, related to this, I mentioned that we have teachers, we have staff that are being trained. We're headed into Black History Month. And so we're being sent these documents. I'm reviewing them. Some of the things in these documents I feel encouraged about. I'm glad to see that one example, as I look at, this is an Ames Community School District classroom equity audit. So the teachers are supposed to use this and make sure that they are doing the things that are on this list. So one of them is, I ensure that the visuals and materials reflect racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds represented by students, all of the students in their classroom, and racially, socioeconomically, etc. And so, yeah, I'm glad to see that. We should have representative curriculum. We should read books to children from children of all racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds, absolutely. And there's some components in this that I'm concerned about before I head into those concerns that conflict with 802 bill that I just read, I just want to pause and open up. So I'm an educator. I teach classes on health disparities and diversity and health behavior change. So I am familiar with this bill because I am bound to it myself as an educator. How much training has been done in the public school system? I got Jennifer and Cedric. You are held responsible for this as well. This is in the public school system. Are you trained on this? Are you familiar with this bill? What does it look like so I'm not in K-12, so what does it look like in the K-12 setting as far as ensuring that you are compliant with this bill?
I feel like I know about the bill, but at the school where I'm working now, the high school at Gilbert, we're teaching content. So this is not pertaining to, what I'm doing. So I'm not getting trained on this because I'm not going to be teaching this. I know about the bill. I know that things, like you say, we're bound to this. I know that I'm not supposed to be doing this, and I'm not going to do it anyways because my job is to teach a language and not be teaching this.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying is that you teach Spanish. You're paid to teach Spanish. You teach Spanish. You don't teach about racism in a Spanish class. That's typically those events in history are taught more in social studies classes. So you teach Spanish in your Spanish class. I wonder, do you at times teach about the Spanish culture? Is that a part of your Spanish class?
I do, because, in order to be immersed in the language or know about the language, it's good to know about the culture, because if you don't know the culture, then you don't know the language. But where I'm going with this is, being a Nicaraguan, I came to the U.S. 11 or 12 years ago, and I never heard about being racist until I came to the U.S. It was a brand new concept to me. Yes, we have different people, different skin colors in Nicaragua, but we are people, we are humans. That's simple. We don't talk about being racist. Then I moved to the US, then I worked in Marshalltown for several years, a town where you have Asians, you have Hispanics, you have African American, white people, and we never talked about that. I didn't even see like kids being racist. And then I moved into Ames, and all of it is about racist and these subjects, these topics. And it's like, I'm here to teach content. Why are we touching on those topics? Like, it is irrelevant to what I teach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now, it's not to say that I've heard you say when we've had previous conversations in our other episodes that if you saw racism in your classroom, you would address that.
Of course. If I see somebody making fun of another person, I will stop it right away. It's not about if I'm trained or not trained. It is as a human being. That is my responsibility as the adult in the classroom, as the teacher in the classroom, to say, stop that. That's not going to happen in my classroom. And my students know that. I tell them, this is my classroom. That's not going to happen here. Thank you. Let's move on. But I know I don't go, over and over and, teaching because of, no, this is not going to happen. Let's move on.
Yeah, you don't, you require respectful behavior in your classroom. And as far as when you're teaching about the culture, these are the practices, and you don't sound like you have to consider a whole lot this bill because you're not teaching that any one population is an oppressor, or that any one population, any one race has inherent characteristics, everyone in that race that looks and has this type of skin color. You're not teaching that as a part of
That's right.
the culture as it relates to your Spanish topics. And then Jennifer, how about you? How familiar are you with the bill and your training? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the bill. In where I'm at, we're not like trained to go over the bill and be careful that we don't, that we're in compliance with the bill or not in compliance with the bill. Now, I know that the training that we still get, the language is still connected to what the bill says that we're not supposed to do. Like, we find it in that bill.
And I was sent that by some teachers, I have one of those here, and perhaps I haven't been through these trainings. So as I clicked on a link that was sent to me by a teacher, it said, as I mentioned, there's some things I'm glad to see in it. One of those was that there's going to be representative materials in the curriculum. Some of the things that are concerning, these are the first two things on the list. Teachers are supposed to make sure that in my plans or materials, I do not say or suggest that members of the oppressive group are kind, humane, or fair. In my plans or materials, I do not say or suggest that oppressors respected the beliefs and customs of the oppressed group. So the first one is present tense. The second one is past tense. Can you help? Who is the oppressive group? Is that said explicitly?
They don't say explicitly.
Mm-hmm. It's implied.
It's implied. From my 4 years of being in Ames Community School District, and having this as training for me, I felt that the implication is the white people.
Right. And I've got a clip that will help us to understand that further. I've gotten the equity newsletters that are sent to the staff. I've gone through, there's a lot of support resources and readings. And so I have gone to those and learned from them. So I've learned what is meant by oppressive group. Now, I think that it is important for us to stop and say, if we're teaching about history, if we're teaching about slavery, civil rights, then there are instances, there are times in history when if someone is keeping another person as a slave, white people kept black people as slaves, that's oppressing a black person. Absolutely.
Right.
And that needs to be said. That needs to be taught to children. Children need to learn about what racism is. They need to learn about it in the history of this country. It still happens today. I don't think anybody in this room would say that racism is gone.
Right.
And yet, where this bill clarifies that it becomes divisive is when there's labeling of an entire group of people based on what they look like, based on their skin color. All white people are this category, all black people are in this, all Hispanics are over here, all Asians are this, all females are that. And so what's concerning about this is that it is not past tense speaking about a point in history. It says members of the oppressive group.
And can I just kind of jump in real quick?
Yeah.
The reason why I have felt led to believe that it's for the white Caucasian is because of the titles of the words like white supremacy, white fragility.
And those are the resources that I'm referring to that you are given through your training resources.
Correct.
Do these readings, listen to this podcast. And I have one of them right in front of me that I'm going to click on here. There is an author, speaker, intellectual leader in the country named Ibram X. Kendi. And a lot of his work is seen throughout the curriculum that is being presented with this content that we're referring to that is concerning. I'm going to play a clip that he was speaking about the books he's written, about his mission and his work. He was on CBS News. I picked this clip when he was sharing this because it summarizes many of the books and the mission pretty concisely. So let's take a listen.
It is critical for white people, for people in general, to stop denying their racist ideas, to stop denying the ways in which policies have benefited them, to stop denying their racism, and to realize that actually the heartbeat of racism itself is denial, and the sound of that heartbeat is, I'm not racist.
So I'm going to pause right there and want to just draw out and focus in on what he says specifically is it's critical for white people, it's critical for people in general to stop denying their racism. So part of his messaging is that all people, every interaction that is had is done through the lens of race, and that white people inherently are racist. And then he goes on to say, because actually the heartbeat of racism itself is denial. And the sound of that heartbeat is, I'm not racist. So if a person says, I'm not racist, what he is saying is that's actually evidence that they are racist. What do you hear through that clip, through these resources? How do you process that?
It's difficult. The first time I'd heard this was 4 years ago in training, and my mind was really boggled. I mean, I'd been teaching, well, this is my 10th year, and this is the first time I've heard of this, and I had to do a lot of just research and just questioning myself of, am I? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, and knowing that, well, my first experience with education was 20 years ago. That's when I first came into education as a EA in special ed in South Carolina. And I know my heart and I know my passion. And then to be told, basically, no, that's not true because of this, because of your color. And because you deny it, you're automatically racist. I'm like, a lot to process.
Yeah.
A lot to
How about you,
process.
Cedric?
I don't know. It's hard to. I don't think it's hard. It's confusing. I think I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, in Ames Community School District. It's when we started going through CRT, and all that, and that's when I started listening to those things, and I go back to my beliefs, to my God. If I have a wife, she is white. And God created her white. And when God created her white, he didn't say, I'm going to create a racist white, person today. No. He created my wife being white, Just because you are white, that doesn't make you racist. And I don't, it is confusing. It is, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. As a person of color, and seeing a lot of white people, when I see somebody white, I don't think it's racist. It doesn't even cross my mind. I see somebody that I want to get to know, and once I get to know that person, I will get to know that person for who they are, not for their color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this totally breaks down on a number of ways. I've also when I first heard this concept, it makes your head spin. And so I went to do more learning about it as well. And what I learned is that this is actually a linguistics trick in order to deceive and manipulate people. It's called the Kafka Trap, which is a fallacy where if someone denies being X, it's taken as evidence that the person is X, since someone who is X would deny being X. And so this trap is derived from the novel The Trial by writer Franz Kafka. And again, it's a sophisticated rhetorical device in which any denial by an accused person serves as evidence of guilt. So it's essentially, you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. You are, because of your skin color, you are X or Y. And where this completely breaks down is, for a number of reasons, but what does it mean for then, you said you are a person of color, your wife is white. So within the context of this ideology, what would that make your daughter?
I have no idea. Like I said, it's confusing. So then, what's my daughter? Like, she's, Nicaraguan and I will say U.S. or white. And so what is she? Like at the end of the day, is she like partially racist, but not because of her skin color? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. And going back to the trap or trick that you were talking about, I think that for a lot of people, it's been really having them trapped in that ideology, because I have none, or I know a person that have apologized for being white. And it was like, are you kidding me? You're apologizing for the way God created you, for being white? Like, no, please don't.
And that's comes back to this narrative, this ideology is not beneficial to all people. It's harmful to all people, not just, we're focusing right now on the harms of it on white people, on families, on mixed race people, but this is not beneficial to people of color either. Why would you want to be in a position where when that person came to you and said, Cedric, I am so sorry I'm white, and essentially what they're saying is, I'm sorry that I have the privilege of being white and I'm better than you. That's terrible. They're apologizing to you that, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm white and you're not.
Correct.
Wow. That's,
Yeah, like I said, it's just confusing. And what do you respond to that? Like, okay, or don't apologize. You're white, period.
Yeah. So it in that moment when they apologized to you, that didn't benefit you in any way.
No.
It's almost speaking down to you. It's upsetting. And so as I've been doing more learning, most people, as we have already discussed, aren't racist. Certainly there are some some people who are. And they don't want to do things that are racist. They don't want to say things or participate in racism of any kind. And so they are manipulated into this trap, into concluding that in order for me not to be racist, I have to confess that I'm not racist. And I do not support that. I don't agree with that level of logic. I think that that's mental manipulation. It's gaslighting. And I will not be bullied into participating in that narrative. It pits people up against each other. And that's what we're seeing unfolding in our school we have violence that's increasing, division. If you listen to the school board meeting where this content was rolled out, it's January 25th of 2021. It was 6 hours long and eventually they had to cut it off. It divides people and it's heartbreaking. What thoughts do you have about how the school then has approached the training of teachers? So I've played a clip from Ibram X. Kendi. There's other materials as well. As I looked through the document, this is on all of the kindergarten through, this is the elementary curriculum that was sent to me. And there are links that say that directives to teachers: expose the truth. Don't whitewash history. So I just want to repeat that don't whitewash history. What exactly does that mean? Have you heard that phrase?
Not me.
You have not heard whitewashing history. And Jennifer, what does it mean for you?
I hadn't heard it until the material came out to us last week. So of course I'm going to research, see what does this mean. Another word that is new to me. And so whitewashing would be when, like, it's done, I guess, in the movies, Hollywood, when a white person is chosen to play a black or other ethnic character. But another example which I think for for elementary, high school, middle school, just in education in general, is a teacher sharing selective stories that we tell about history or the way that it's told. That's what the whitewashing would be.
And it's specifically related to race. So that white part is relevant. The articles that were linked in that directive to teachers not to whitewash, I've gone through, read those articles, and you're referencing some of the material from that. And it occurs most commonly, this author of this article, from Iowa State, in fact, Claire either Hop or Hobie. And what is described, there's an Iowa State person who is interviewed by the last name of Lawrence, and what he explains about whitewashing in academia is the idea of white people not choosing to uplift stories that make them uncomfortable. And it falls in line with, and this is quoted, white fragility. So he's saying that white people, out of their own fragile selves, will not teach factual history on topics like things like slavery because they feel uncomfortable with it. What I hear in that, they feel uncomfortable with it. They feel, why might they feel uncomfortable with that? I mean, as a white person, I'm not uncomfortable with my children learning about slavery. It's sad. And I would hope that anyone that hears about that's heartbreaking. And we need to ensure that discrimination does not ever happen again in our schools, in our country.
Exactly.
And so what do you, any insights on that? Why is he suggesting that white people are choosing not to uplift these stories? Stories, I learn about these stories from my white teachers.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, what I'm hearing, and correct to me if I'm wrong, is like white people should stop going to school to be history teachers. I don't know, like, I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. Like, as a white person, you cannot teach history. Like, I mean, you're teaching the history that you learn. I mean, you're going to school to be a history teacher. And if I went to school to be a history teacher, then I'm going to teach history. And like, as you said, Kira, like, it might be heartbreaking, and very hard to teach, but that's history, like, go ahead and teach it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in this article, he goes on to say that teachers don't talk about slavery. We talk about George Washington, which we should, but George Washington was also a slave owner. So what he's accusing white teachers of not talking, of being unwilling to teach and talk about slavery.
Where is he finding those white people? I'm sorry.
Right?
I'm sorry. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so are there white teachers in the country that won't teach this? I bet that there are.
Right.
But to say that all of them won't teach it, that's when it becomes concerning, and it is in direct conflict, a violation of House File 802 bill, to say that any one population, any one group of people have inherent characteristics based off of their skin color. And he finishes by urging white people in America to, quote, take off their rose-colored glasses and see the nation for what it truly is, but most importantly, what it can be. And so it divides people. It divides people. The last part of the sentence, absolutely what it can be, I wholeheartedly support that there can be change, and that is why I'm a part of this podcast, part of this organization, is because I hope to see that change and be a part of the solution. Mm-hmm. So how do the teachers receive that information when they are told and trained that is, so this is being told to the white teachers then? Or it's told to everyone?
Everyone.
Okay.
Everyone. Yeah. And everyone who goes to our development,
So the
PDs, development, professional development days, we're all told. As far as how they receive it, I don't know how others receive it. It's not really talked about outside of professional development of, are we going to make sure we go through that equity checklist? And another thing, too, is I am a special ed teacher. So kind of like teaching Spanish, I teach special ed. I don't teach content outside of reading, writing, and math, and it is individualized for the student. So I'm fortunate that I'm not required to teach anything that's been given me to teach, especially like last year.
But you still have to go through the training.
I still go through the training, yes. Yeah.
And so would you say then, after those trainings, that it sounds like teachers don't debrief on these topics a whole lot, and then how it's implemented in the classroom from kindergarten through 12th grade may be very different.
Right.
And so, and that could be different you're saying you're in an elementary, and could be different in the high school. As far as the materials that have been sent to me related to the high school, there are some upcoming workshops that we want to help families be aware of content that's going to be available to their children. This was sent to me from a teacher directly, and so these are topics that students can choose from. Some of them, I would love to go to them and learn more about them. One of the very first ones is African American victories, learn about accomplishments, victories of African Americans throughout history. So there's a lot of great topics in here, things that I would think and hope that we could all come together and celebrate. There's also some topics that may be concerning. Some of them are, what is a microaggression? How does it affect the students of color? What is implicit bias? How does it impact cross-racial interactions? It depends on how this is taught. The title, based on what I've read through the resources that are posted for teachers, it could be concerning. It depends on how this is taught. For those who don't know what microaggressions are, what have you been taught in your teacher trainings as far as what is a microaggression?
I'm not aware of
what a microaggression is. Okay. So for our listeners that are not aware of this, we all know what aggression is. A lot of times this is, it could be physical, it could be verbal, and it's overt and more explicit and obvious. A microaggression is more implicit. It could be something as similar to if I would ask where you are from, if you are a person, what is referred to throughout this narrative, this ideology, is if you're someone that's not in the dominant race, and I would say, hey, where are you from? That is perhaps a microaggression, because what is being implied through that is you're not from here. You are an outsider. So I've been through some of these trainings myself, and it can put a person on edge when you're trying to get to know somebody and you're not sure how they might receive the information. There are things that we all have biases. I think that we need to, of course, say that out loud. And sometimes those biases will influence our behavior. So biases, however, are different than overt racism, and they're being treated as though they're the same thing. How are you processing through bias versus, because you talk about bias a lot in your trainings, right? In the teacher training, is that correct, Jennifer? And so the different, have you sorted that out? What's the difference between a bias and perhaps what could be perceived as a microaggression in that way and a overt racism? Have you distinguished the difference? I think some of those things would be helpful to teachers to sort out the difference between because they're not the same thing, but they're being treated as though they are. And I mean, even just the way we say things, there can be messages communicated in the tone. So if I took that same example, so where are you from? The way I say it like that, hopefully I'm trying to get to know you and something about you. It can be taken and perceived a different way as a microaggression, but I could say it in a way that might communicate just that. If I would say, Jennifer, where are you from? Right? So that might communicate that I mean something negative by it. And so it's okay. I think that it's good. It's okay to have these conversations as long as, again, we are being in line with House File 802 in that we're not labeling students, people together and saying that all white people are X and all black people are Y and that we're staying away from that, which is another concerning topic on this list. One of them is, what is white privilege? How does someone know if they have it? If I have it, what should I do about it? Are you familiar with those topics? White privilege, Cedric?
Not much.
Not much? Mm-mm. How about you, Jennifer? You're nodding.
Yeah. Basically, because of my color, I have a better chance at everything because of my color. I have a better chance at better education.
And that's what's being taught is white privilege. That's what you're getting at.
That's what I have.
And I think, Cedric, that's what that person was in part apologizing for. My life's going to be easier. Sorry about that.
Having more advantages than me. Okay.
that's what they were. Yeah. I mean, but that's also a part of this narrative as I have learned it, which is that in order to be freed from your oppressive nature as a white person, then you need to confess your guilt and shame for it. And so that sounds like that's what that person was doing.
Right. But once you apologize with me, what change it? What things change it? Like,
and it perpetuates a terrible narrative.
Right. I mean, I feel like nothing changed it. Like, you're still being white.
Right.
I'm just honest. Like, I mean, so I'm still being me. Like, let's move on. Get out of that mentality and let's move on. Like, I'm going to work as hard as I can to be where I want to be and to get the things that I want to be, and you do the same. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's the thing. Like, how hard do you work? Like, not just because of being white, you're going to not work and get all of these privileges that they're calling. No, it's like, how hard are you going to work, and how hard am I going to work? Like, that's it.
And so you're saying that part of your belief system is that your outcomes are based on how hard you work, and you do have some control over that.
Correct.
And so part of this narrative, I think, is so destructive for people of color, is if we teach these children of color that white people have a privilege and people of color have a disadvantage. We're telling young children of color that they are permanently disadvantaged because of what they look like. That's not encouraging. That's not empowering. And the message, it doesn't sound like you believe that.
No. I mean, that thing that you just said, like, by telling them those things, we're already telling them that they have disadvantages. So what, and I'm going to reuse the word, what advantage is to them to know this? Like,
how does it help them?
Exactly. So there's no help there. Let's just teach content, dude. Let's move on. Let's teach content. Let's teach you well, and you're going to have a better future, you know? But the whole race or color is like, it's not relevant to me.
And so you're saying teach them content, empower them with knowledge, empower them with an education and skills that they need to be successful instead of filling them full of a narrative that they're a permanent victim and that then their white peers are at fault for that. Again, pitting those children up against each other.
You are already sending the message. You are already telling them, like, it doesn't matter how hard you work. They're white, you know, so they have advantages already. So it's like, no, let's not bring that to the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're saying, why am I limited by my skin color?
Correct.
I can work hard and achieve.
That's right.
Yeah. And that isn't that what we want to empower all of our children with?
That's right.
And so what, as educators, what do you encourage parents, families with this information that we've presented? And we're really kind of just starting to scratch the surface. What do you encourage parents, families to do as we head into Black History Month as it relates to these topics? You have thoughts as educators for parents and families?
I think that I said this already 3 times. Parents get informed and ask for this document and see that topics that are going to be taught during this month. And if you disagree with them, tell this, tell the teachers, tell the principals, tell the people at district office. And if you feel like it, don't send your kids to school that day. And tell them, my kid is not coming to school because of what is being taught today. And if you're going to have something else besides that for them to come, then I will send them. But if then you do that, you're teaching those topics and then you don't have anything else for them to do, then where's, like, I think the equity part, if they're going to be doing that, we need to be doing something else, because I do not want my kids sitting on that chair listening to those topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jennifer, how about you? What do you recommend for parents?
To definitely reach out, request material that's being taught so that they can read through it and decide for themselves. Ultimately, parents are still the parent and should have the final say of what their child is being taught. And as we go through Black History Month, encourage those tough discussions of our history.
Yeah.
Because I myself, I don't want to repeat of history of segregation.
Right.
Like that's against my core belief as a Christian. And we need to have those tough discussions about what history did look like so we don't repeat it. But then we need to come together as humans and encourage each other.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And I think that a barrier for parents, because I've experienced this myself personally, to asking those questions, if you are like me, there's this concern that if I ask a question about this, well, then the teacher is going to think I'm racist. Or if I say this out loud or say the reason, then they're going to call me racist. They're going to call me names. And they very well may. They very well may. I ran for school board, as I've talked about last fall, and I was called those things. And at the end of the day, for me, for my husband, for our family, we have to reflect on what are our beliefs, what do we value, what's important for our family, and if people call us names in the process, then so be it. And that's part of it. And it's an opportunity for growth too. It's just to grow who you are, and you know who you are, and your children see you standing up for what you value, your beliefs, doing it respectfully, in love, and smilingly, unapologetically, saying that this is important, and I won't have my children subjected to this idea or that if it's not consistent with those beliefs. And so I just want to encourage parents, if they have that concern, that it's real, and yes, it may happen, and you'll be okay on the other side. I was. I'm doing okay. And lastly, what I do want to end with is, we talked a lot about the concerns. I think that there's a lot of good things going on too. I saw in the curriculum some great stories that will be read to the kids throughout history of heroes. One book specifically that I am looking through here, Ruby Bridges Goes to School. It's the true story of the first Black child to integrate a New Orleans school. In the 1960s, she was 6. She walked through an angry crowd into a school and changed history. She's extraordinary, and the first Black person to attend an all-white elementary school. And I want my children to get to celebrate the courage of a young girl who stayed strong in the face of that racism. And I want them to see that role model, among others, George Washington, Carver, and Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and so I'm excited for them to hear those stories, and I know that those are coming up in these next few months. Did you have any other insights or stories that you're excited about, or things to share for parents as we close our episode today? Cedric or Jen? Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us again, Jen, and thank you to our listeners for listening today. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our news and updates on our webpage. Join the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts, because it's together that we build a thriving community in Ames and Central Iowa.